Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Association Leadership Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Association Leadership Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today on the show, we have Jim Thompson with IMI Association Executives. Welcome.
Hey, Lee, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. I am so excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us about IMI. How are you serving folks?
Sure. So IMI is an association management company that's based here in the Raleigh area, Raleigh, North Carolina. And we've been in business for, about 35 years, represent about 23 different clients from anywhere from small regional associations all the way up to big international associations.
So what's your backstory? How'd you get involved in this line of work?
Oh, gosh, Lee. So, it's an interesting story. So for about 6 years, I actually worked in the newspaper industry, was a reporter with the News and Record in Greensboro, North Carolina, and was getting kind of, I would say, disenchanted with the newspaper business. And frankly, considering where the newspaper industry is today, I'm kind of thankful for that. It was definitely a blessing in disguise. But I actually went back and talked to my career counselor at my university where I attended and made some comment to her that, I was sort of disenchanted with the newspaper industry. I didn't know what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Here I am just mid-20s and, I didn't know where in the world I was going to go. And it just so happened at the time I was very involved in a civic organization in town called the Greensboro JCs. And was just very engaged in that, community service. And, she made some comment to me that, she said, every time you mention the JCs, you get this sort of spark in your eye and a little sparkle. And, she's like, have you ever thought about going into the nonprofits and actually working for nonprofits? And I'm like, well, I already work for a newspaper industry. I don't know that I could make any less money. She's like, no, you could, no, I don't mean like nonprofit as in you don't make any money, but so I actually worked for Junior Achievement of Northeastern North Carolina for about a year or so, and then actually had a great opportunity to work for the North Carolina Association of Realtors and actually using my marketing kind of communication skills in a job there. And the rest is history. So, this year actually marks my 25th year working in the association industry. So, absolutely love it.
Now, for folks who are working in an association, but maybe not with a firm like yours that helps them, what's your kind of sales pitch to them when they're deciding whether to keep going at it alone or to partner with somebody that has the expertise across a variety of associations like your firm?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So, there's several things. With associations, we know that not all organizations can afford to have their own captive staff. And frankly, there's a lot of costs that go into having your own professional staff, whether it's, just the overhead that goes along with it. It's hard necessarily, like you kind of alluded to, sometimes it's hard to find, somebody that's good at everything. It's hard to find somebody who can do member services, who can also do marketing communications, who can also do finance. So, for some organizations, it's more cost effective to outsource either some or, in a lot of the cases with our organizations, all of the management services to run their organization. Just from a cost standpoint, when you look at, we've looked at several studies over the years through AMCI, which is the AMC Institute, and you look at what a lot of standalone associations are paying for their, professional services compared to their overall budget. Typically an association management company can save an organization, anywhere from 5 to 20% a year on their management services, utilizing an AMC. Also, I think, there are some organizations who I'll use, some of the medical groups, for example. We used to work with a medical group that we had a previous association management company where, lobbying and advocacy was one of their big things that they focused on. And so they spent a tremendous amount of money on that. But what was so great about working with the management companies, it enabled them to reduce their expenses to manage the association, but yet be able to put, a considerable amount of resources towards lobbying and advocacy, something that was very important to them. So it allowed them to, save some money, which enabled them to do something that was very important to them.
Now, do you find that some of the associations, before they take the leap to working with a firm like yours, that they underestimate maybe the amount of time and skill and commitment it takes in order to grow an association? And maybe they were on a roll for a while, but as soon as there's some turbulence and maybe member engagement goes low, or maybe their members are not, rejoining, they get into a challenge of, it's hard to kind of spin that up from scratch. Whereas an association management company like yours, you have so many best practices and seeing what's working, what's not, and trends, and you're so on top of it because you are working with a variety of associations that you can come in and make a big difference pretty rapidly.
Oh, 100%. You're right on, Lee. That's I always say that's the beauty of being in an AMC environment, is that, for example, with our organization, my role as vice president of client relations here at IMI. So not only do I serve as the executive director for 2 national associations, but I oversee our account managers. And, between all of our account managers, they have, 150, 200 years of experience of, combined association experience between the lot of them. So if you've got an association that's coming to us that's maybe struggling with growing their membership, or, maybe they are looking at, revamping their conference and making it a true, hybrid experience, or, looking at developing a certification program, whatever the case is, chances are, one of our account managers has been down that road before and has the experience that they can, bring to the table. And if our account managers don't have it, certainly one of our VPs, in our client relations or client services, or our current president of IMI, certainly several of us have been down that path before. There's really not much that we haven't experienced in some way, shape, or form.
Now, what is the typical pain that an association, before they begin a conversation with your firm, like what are they going through where it's like, hey, maybe I should be calling IMI? What is happening in their world that kind of precipitates that call to you?
I think one of the big things that I see from an association, again, this is, not counting the associations who maybe were at another management company or whatever the case is, but maybe, and I'm just using the example of, an association who decides that they want to go to a management company for the first time. They've all been run internally, maybe. For a lot of associations, they're tired of being stuck in the weeds of running the association while also trying to lead the association. And that's a hard thing to do. When you get to the point where, you're trying to grow the association, but you're so busy running the organization and you're in the organization, that's just hard to be thinking outside and thinking about, where you want to go strategically, because you're so busy caught up in just the running the day to day. So, for an association who's looking to take that next leap and grow their organization, maybe they have been all volunteer run for a long time. An AMC is a great opportunity for them to kind of put some of those administrative duties to the side and let somebody else run the association while they spend time working on the association.
Right. So it's a delegation, not an abdication.
Correct. Exactly. Because again, I think that's the problem. Most associations that are, especially ones that are all volunteer run, or maybe they have some small, minuscule administrative services, it's still, they get caught up in trying to be a volunteer, but also managing the business of the association. So.
Yeah, it gets, I've been involved in a variety of levels and a variety of groups like that. And it just, when you're relying on all volunteers, then you're at kind of the mercy of volunteers. Right. And the volunteers,
exactly.
Have jobs and lives and a livelihood that's really their most important priority. And then if you need them to, make the association the most important thing, it's just a really difficult needle to thread.
Absolutely. I know. I always, and it's something I always tell my staff, and I've taught association one-on-one programs for a number of years. And one of the things I always try to remind staff that worked with associations is like, don't be offended when your volunteers don't do what they say they do. I mean, say they, or say they, they're supposed to do, because, as much as, yes, it's our job is to run the association, and that's our main priority. For them, the association may be their third or fourth priority in their life. I mean, between, they have day jobs, they have families. Chances are they're type A people. They're very involved in so they're probably involved in other organizations. They have other time commitments that they're dealing with. So yeah, you're right. I mean, you can't expect a volunteer to make the association their job.
So when an organization decides to work with you and your firm, where's the first thing they notice? Like, oh, this is a good idea. This is really freeing up time. I'm seeing that I am getting to think big picture. Is there something that happens, maybe like a quick win for an association when they start working for you guys?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest quick wins are when, especially if they've afforded us the opportunity. One of the things that we offer to all of our clients is if they don't already have one, is a sort of a mini strategic plan that kind of gives them some, a few goals and objectives and tactics that they can accomplish over the next year or two. And I think usually within the first, 60, 90 days, after a few board meetings, when we're sitting with them and, we as staff are reviewing the status of the strategic plan and kind of keeping them, monitored and up to date on where things are, kind of being that sort of, I refer to as sort of the air traffic controller, just making sure all of the planes are flying where they need to be flying and going where they need to be going. You're just taking care of all those things for them. And it's so nice for them to be sitting at board meetings and hearing updates about where they're at and where they're still lagging behind, where they need to go, which then enables them to be thinking futuristically and not sort of in the minutia of, that kind of level of detail.
So now, any advice for the associations out there when it comes to member engagement in today's world where everybody is kind of pulled in 50 million directions, and now you're in a work world, especially where it's hybrid, where some people are working remotely, some people are in the office, like it's a whole different kind of association, I would imagine, in today's world as compared to, 10 years ago.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, the organizations that I've seen that are most successful at today's, modern, 21st century membership engagement is those organizations that don't forget those 18th century practices, meaning like people still want to talk to people, whether it's by phone, or, in person. And when those opportunities aren't available, making those interactions available virtually as much as possible. I think organizations that are truly embracing the hybrid model, I'll use one of my associations as a great example that I work with. They have truly embraced the hybrid model for their conferences and are starting to see record numbers of people attending these meetings. But it's because they're being very intentional about the experience. A lot of associations say they run a hybrid meeting, but in fact, really all they do is put a camera in the back of the room and stream the meeting. And the true definition of hybrid is those meetings that completely replicate the in-person experience, but to a virtual audience. So making sure there's engagement, making sure there's activities, making sure there's networking opportunities, making sure that, there's a chance for the in-person audience to interact with the virtual audience and vice versa. So I think associations that truly get that, that it is a two-way streak between, interacting in person, interacting virtually, but then not forgetting those personal connections, the handwritten note, it's like a thing of the past, but, it's something, it means a lot when you're, getting things like that. A 20-year-old who just joined an association, a handwritten thank you card means just as much to them as a, 60-year-old member who's been around for 30, 40 years, so it's like not missing those little human touches that are really important to anybody, not forgetting that.
Yeah, it's something in our organization we call relationship building moments, is how to create more and more of those in the interactions, because you have to constantly be pushing the value, or else people are, if they're not getting the value, they're not going to just keep rejoining. You have to continuously think of ways to just create more and more value for your members, or else they're not going to be members.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Lee, the funny thing about it is, as much as we say that, it's like, I've been in the association industry for 25 years. Like, I can't think of a time when I've been involved in the association world where we haven't been talking about the importance of creating member value. I mean, it's just something that it should always be in our DNA. I mean, we should always be thinking about that. I mean, one of the things that, I really strive for with all of our account managers is, it's one thing to provide member service. It's another thing to provide a member experience. It's something that they'll remember, because everybody at the bare minimum should be providing member service. That's just the bare minimum that you should be doing. But, organizations that create experiences, like you said, are developing those relational experiences and moments. I really like that term that you used there. Because I think those are the associations that are more successful.
Yeah. Is there a story maybe you can share when you don't have to name the association, but maybe share the challenge that they were having, and then after working with you, how you were able to take them to a new level?
Yeah, sure. So I'll use the example I was talking about with the conference, for example. So, when our in-person meetings had always been doing really well. And then we went, pandemic hit, we went all virtual. Those meetings were fairly well attended. And we were doing a virtual component to our conference. And, the very first meeting back from the pandemic, we had a pretty good number of folks attending the virtual meeting. And then, the subsequent two meetings, the attendance just dropped, just plummeted. And so we knew, we have got to do something about this. If we're going to continue to offer a virtual component to this meeting, we've got to do something to make it more valuable for those. So we actually put together a task force, and that was made up of, people who have attended virtual meetings in the past. We actually did a virtual town hall that we invited every person who had ever attended a virtual meeting with us in the past, whether they had been in person before or only virtual, and just really gathered a lot of feedback from them. And from that, developed a new sort of hybrid experience. But one of the big components that we incorporated was, and we call it it was basically a virtual meeting liaison, or so it was basically, we had somebody on the ground who was sort of our go-to person, so that, the virtual audience always had, a connection with the in-person audience via this person. So they were basically like their advocate. I mean, they were essentially advocating for them in the in-person meeting. And so, we even had, we did things like, after the keynote speaker presented, we had like a little green room set up with the camera and the Zoom meeting set up, where the speaker came over and actually had a conversation with the virtual audience, like during the networking break. And so they got a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with the keynote speaker that even, the people in the in-person audience didn't even have a chance to experience. We even had a situation where we had staff members that were attending virtually, and they messaged our virtual advocate and said, "Hey, I see one of our team leads at the meeting, and her birthday is today. Is there any way we could sing her happy birthday?" And we actually had them shown up on the screen at the conference and had them sing happy birthday to her at the in-person audience. So it was like that. We sort of just broke down those, worked with them to sort of break down the barriers between that in-person and virtual experience. So it was almost like they were one, if you will. And we have been slowly, steadily, they started out, I think their last virtual meeting they had about 45 people on it. And we were almost 100 people attending that meeting this year.
Wow. And that just, when you focus on that kind of human being to human being, it just makes a world of difference. It literally humanizes the virtual, right? You are getting that hybrid experience. They're not just, like you said, throwing a camera in the back of a room and with a wide shot and saying, okay, here, we did it. Check the box,
right. Right. Exactly.
So if somebody wants to learn more, or maybe they're frustrated with their membership, maybe they're frustrated with their events, what is the best way to connect with you or somebody on your team?
Sure. You can just email me. My email address is really simple. It's just Jim, Jim, at IMIAE.com.
And if they go to IMIAE.com, that website, they'll be able to find more information about the firm and the different associations you work with and things like that.
Yep, absolutely. Matter of fact, there's a link on there if you're interested in submitting a proposal or RFP. You can go in there and click a link if there's something that's you're specifically interested in a service or whatever the case is. So absolutely.
And then you serve associations around the country or globally?
Globally, yeah. We have like I said in our intro, we have anywhere from small regional associations all the way up to we have one or two international associations.
Now, is there a sweet spot or niche, or it's kind of industry agnostic?
We're fairly industry agnostic. I mean, we have sort of identified what we would refer to as our ideal client. We have a set of core values here at IMI. But one of the big ones that we subscribe to is around the areas of collaboration. So, one of the things our sweet spot, I would definitely is full service clients. But we really like to work with those groups that have, very diverse boards. So, and then I don't mean just diversity from a race standpoint, but just, from a gender, urban versus rural, just seeing boards who have a diversity of thought, I would say. And then just, working with groups that view us as partners and collaborators and not just, we're not, if you're looking for somebody to just manage your association, that's not us. We're there to lead with you.
Right. It sounds like you're not looking for a transactional relationship. You're looking for a relationship where you're partners and you're all kind of rowing the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
And once again, that website is IMIAE.com. Jim Thompson, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing such important work and we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Association Leadership Radio.